want you to
Kick me.
as hard as you can.
With me.
Chances are, if you've seen an image of the legendary Bruce Lee, say emblazoned on a t-shirt or a poster, it's from Enter the Dragon. You know, poised, ready to strike, 3 bloody scratches on his ripped abs. Enter the Dragon is by far the martial arts master's most famous film, and generally considered among the best martial arts movies ever made. And for good reason. It's frickin' awesome. It also holds a place as the final completed movie before his death in 1973. On this episode of Real Action, we're looking back at Enter the Dragon, Bruce Lee's breakout on the big screen, and the film that brought him and his style of martial arts truly into the mainstream. Let's go. I look at Enter the Dragon as the culmination of everything that Bruce Lee wanted to be as a Hollywood actor. Lee only completed 2 English-speaking film roles in his too short career, but his charisma was always undeniable, and this was the role that allowed him to shine. But it also showed the potential for what could have been if he hadn't died so young. Enter the Dragon is a little bit of everything: kung fu, James Bond spy film, and even had elements of blaxploitation and kitsch. The film also became the ultimate expression of Lee's martial arts philosophy.
A martial artist has to take responsibility for himself and to accept the consequences of his own doing.
Utilizing all of the skills and lessons he had learned and putting them on display in a kick-ass flick that had something for everybody. Thanks for watching Real Action. If you enjoy our shows, please subscribe to our channel right now, like this video, and click on the bell so you can be notified each time a new video goes up. In a secluded, peaceful Shaolin monk community, Lee is approached by stodgy British intelligence agent Brathwaite to accept an invitation to fight in a tournament held on an island owned by Han, a reclusive millionaire and head of a criminal organization. Lee has little interest in it, until he learns that Han's right-hand man, O'Hara, brutally murdered his sister years earlier. It isn't long before Lee is sailing to the island to get revenge and take down Han for good. Bruce Lee was coming off the massive success of his directorial debut, The Way of the Dragon, and so Golden Harvest and Warner Brothers wanted to capitalize on that by gearing Enter the Dragon to as wide an audience as possible. One of the first things that sticks out is that it features 3 heroes of different ethnicities in hopes of attracting those groups. Joining Lee were journeyman actor John Saxon as Gambling Man Roper, and newcomer Jim Kelly as Williams, a cool cat with a mean fro. Roper and Williams are old Vietnam War buddies and quickly become thick as thieves. But they also take a liking to Lee, who humiliates an old rival, Parsons, with what he called the art of fighting without fighting.
The art of fighting without fighting?
This idea of being formless is central not only to Enter the Dragon, but to Bruce Lee as a whole, who would build his Jeet Kune Do philosophy around it. Throughout much of the film, Lee constantly reemphasizes this idea in different ways. Like here, in a conversation with his master, probably based in some way on Lee's former sensei, Ip Man.
When the opponent expands, I contract. When he contracts, I expand. And when there is an opportunity, I do not hit. It hits all by itself.
In another, he instructs a young student,
Don't think. Feel. It is like a finger pointing away to the moon. Don't concentrate on the finger or you will miss all that heavenly glory.
and in one of his most famous quotes, Again, in response to his teacher asking him about facing an opponent, Lee responds,
There is no opponent,
when asked why, Lee responds,
because the word I does not exist.
there are many different interpretations of this, with most concluding that it means oneself is the only true obstacle to overcome. Do that and you are invincible. To me, that's never quite made sense. I've always taken it to mean that fighting against oneself is pointless. Be present in the moment. Let the past and worries about the future go. To be present in the moment is to be unstoppable.
There was another day on which Bruce actually got to show his real martial arts prowess. He was doing a break in production and Bruce and the other cast and crew members were goofing around down here. There was a row of extras sitting on this wall behind me. One of them jumped down and says, "Bruce Lee, are you really that good?" And Bruce says, "Are you ready?" And then his foot moved faster than the eye could follow. And before anybody could react, the extra opened his mouth and blood and teeth fell out one side. Examples, really, of the speed and power of the real martial arts skill of Bruce Lee. And it happened right there on the killing fields from Enter the Dragon.
Okay, enough philosophy. Let's get to the fighting. Han's Island is both the perfect battleground and a hedonistic paradise. Lee, Roper, and Williams are each more than a match for their opponents, with Williams easily dispatching of the bullying Parsons. There's also a funny scene as Roper tries to hustle an eager gambler, only for Williams to let his friend get beaten up for longer than expected. That night, Lee breaks curfew and goes off to investigate, easily discovering Han's secret drug operation and locating beautiful undercover agent May. His breaking of the rules would have unexpected consequences the next morning, though. Enter the Dragon isn't just a showcase for Lee, but for loads of martial arts heavyweights on the big screen. I mentioned Jim Kelly earlier. When I was a kid, Jim Kelly was my personal favorite martial arts actor, not only for this film, but for what he would do next. His solo outing in Black Belt Jones, Hot Potato, and in 3 the Hard Way. Kelly was a decorated karate champion in the Shinryu discipline with his own dojo in Los Angeles, which is where he was recruited to star in Enter the Dragon after the first actor, Rodney Tarkington, bailed. Gee, how'd that choice work out, Rodney? Saxon, while he might not look it, was also a black belt in judo and a friend of Lee's. He was one of those actors who had fled Hollywood in the 60s and 70s to star in a bunch of Italian productions, and he had to be convinced to take the Roper role because the script treatment was so slight. Saxon also asked that his character not be killed off, but that it be someone else instead. More on that later because it still haunts me. Also making his presence felt is real action favorite, and still the most intimidating dude in the world, Yang Zhe, aka Bolo Young. He plays Han's muscular enforcer, and the next morning after Lee's breaking of curfew, Bolo literally crushes Han's failed security guards. Later, in a scene that still haunts me to this day, Williams is called into Han's office where they have a fateful conversation about Williams' ego and whether he'll be ready for defeat when it comes. And Williams utters these words that I'll never forget because of how he was just by saying them.
I don't waste my time with it. When it comes, I won't even notice.
Oh, how so?
I'll be too busy looking good.
So freaking cool, man. Of course, he didn't follow that up with,
Man, you come right out of a comic book.
before being beaten and killed in a one-on-one fight by Han and his artificial metal hand like some kind of Bond villain. I always remember the women laughing as Williams makes his futile stand. Still gives me the chills. Every one of the main trio in Enter the Dragon gets their moment, leading to an entire film full of unforgettable screen battles. Lee eventually gets his showdown with O'Hara and uses his incredible speed and striking to humiliate the Bruiser, who embarrasses himself and Han by trying to kill Lee with broken bottles. Who can forget that last fatal stomp by Lee and that feral howl of victory as he grinds his foot into O'Hara's neck? We even get Saxon versus Bolo, which, as crazy as it might seem, is a pretty good fight with Saxon's Roper coming out victorious. Roper, who's the shadiest of the three heroes and nearly joins Han's organization, is also something of a scrapper. That fits Saxon perfectly, who is older and less refined a fighter as his co-stars. Other fighting greats who would appear: Sammo Hung has an early fight with Lee in the film, and Jackie Chan pops up in a couple of scenes if you look closely and quickly enough. How sad is it that we never got to see a full-fledged movie with Lee and Chan side by side? Lee cast the film with real fighters to give it more of an authentic feel. The late Bob Wall, who had starred with Lee in The Way of the Dragon and would also have a role in Game of Death, played the bruising O'Hara. He was an Okinawan martial artist and another with his own dojo in California, one that he eventually sold to Chuck Norris. Rumors he and Lee were actually bitter enemies have been shot down by Wall, and never really made much sense given how often they worked together. Shi Qian, who played the villainous Han, was also a skilled martial artist, as well as Australian champion Peter Archer, who played Parsons. Not to be outdone, Angela Mao Ying, who played Lee's sister, was one of the most prominent female martial arts actresses of the 70s and had just starred in Lady Whirlwind, which many said put her on equal footing with Bruce Lee. When war finally breaks out on the island, that's when Lee's moment really comes. Putting his Jeet Kune Do front and center, he refuses to be bound by a singular style. He defeats his foes easily, whether he's barehanded or using a variety of different weapons, including some fierce nunchaku play. When Lee says to be, quote,
"Be formless, shapeless, like water,"
he lives by it. He flows so swiftly, so effortlessly, as to be untouchable. The fight with Han is brutal, but also a little bit silly the way Han can detach his fake hand and add different weapons to it. But ignoring that, it's another chance for Lee to hammer home his core theme. In a desperate bid to win, Han enters his Hall of Mirrors, getting the advantage over Lee. That is until he remembers an earlier teaching, quote, "Destroy the image and you will break the enemy." It's a lesson he takes quite literally. Enter the Dragon was directed by Robert Clouse, another real action favorite for directing Cynthia Rothrock and China O'Brien years later. Clouse was hardly the most technical filmmaker around, but he knew how to get the most out of his actors. He would be recruited 5 years after Lee's death to Frankenstein together a cut of Lee's final film, Game of Death, which, let's be honest, was an impossible undertaking and kinda looked like it. He would also direct Kelly in Black Belt Jones in 1974. The soundtrack by Lala Schifrin was so popular it earned a gold record. Schifrin, a jazz composer for most of his career, took sounds from China, Japan, and Korea for his samples, combining them with funk to make a sound that was all its own. Lee famously fought with the film's producers over a number of subjects, most notably the film's title. Warner Brothers wanted to go with the generic blood and steel, which Lee thought would give them the chance to re-edit the footage and make Saxon the star. But you couldn't do that with Enter the Dragon, as everyone knew the dragon was Bruce Lee, and this was going to be his big coming out party as a megastar. Obviously, he won that battle. Lee was right as well. Enter the Dragon was a massive hit, earning $350 million worldwide, which is roughly $1.2 billion when adjusted for inflation. At a budget of just $850K, it's one of the most successful movies of all time. Reviews were mixed at the time, and you'll still find a few people who like Lee's other work better, but Enter the Dragon has more than stood the test of time as one of the greatest martial arts movies ever made. Its influence is undeniable, both by increasing the popularity of martial arts in the West, but in the films and other media it inspired. How many video games have characters who are direct knockoffs of Bruce Lee? How many use the same tournament plotline we see in Enter the Dragon? Its box office was on par with James Bond films at the time, and Lifetime surpassed every Bond movie up until GoldenEye. That's just crazy. Of course, Lee would die before there was ever a chance for a sequel, although you can bet there would have been one. Decades later, there have been various reports on attempts to do a remake. One had Sons of Anarchy creator Kurt Sutter attached to a neo-noir titled Awaken the Dragon, which would star Korean pop star actor Rain. Spike Lee, Brett Ratner, and John Wick's David Leitch have been attached to different versions, but nothing has ever happened. Thank goodness. Every time I watch Enter the Dragon, it's a little bit bittersweet. Its remarkable success only hints at what Lee might have been able to accomplish if he had lived longer. More movies with Jackie Chan, more movies with Jim Kelly and Bolo Young, Chuck Norris, and if we were to be so lucky, his own son Brandon Lee. Enter the Dragon is not only just an amazing film for fight fans like yours truly, it's so good that when Bruce Lee delivers a line like, "Boards don't hit back," it actually sounds badass.
Boards don't hit back.
Enter the Dragon gets 9 out of 10 Stallones. Thank you for watching our show. If you like what you see, please subscribe to our channel. Tell your friends who like this sort of content, and turn on the bell to receive notifications for all of our latest videos. We're an independent company and we appreciate all of your support.